Good morning, everyone. It's really good to be back with you in the spring and to talk about art as spiritual practice to set the stage for our festivities this afternoon. And I hope you'll all be able to come and celebrate and sing and dance with us. There's a few aspects of art as spiritual practice I want to share with you, and one is the making of art, the creating of art. There's something any artist will tell you, anybody who does creative work will tell you that there's something mysterious about the creative act. Something, if you have the right perspective, sacred about it, that when you tap into creativity and imagination and the intuitive insights that come in the act of creating, you're tapping into layers of consciousness or awareness that's very similar to, or if not identical with, what you might experience in deep meditation or prayer or acts of devotion. And that's not a coincidence. Artists will tell you that things just happen. There's a certain flow you entered into. It's like grace. I have spent most of my writing life writing nonfiction, but I've also written fiction. And they're very different, because when I write fiction, it engages the imagination in different ways. And things happen. I'm working on a novel, and I'm having the experience that many novelists talk about. You create characters, and you put them in a place, and they start doing things. and if you're smart, you just let that go, and you see it happening in your mind and do your best to remember it or write it down. You're taken by surprise. Amazing grace. You're tapping into something, and all the great artists do that. They don't have to be by nature spiritual. They could be profane. They could be jerks. They could be, people you wouldn't want to hang out with. Picasso, by all accounts, was not a pleasant human being. But in those moments of creativity, they're tapping into something akin to epiphany and revelation. So the first bit of advice I have is to do creative things. Make art. Write stories. Tell stories to your grandkids. Paint. Build things. Dance. Sing songs. Take up an instrument. Bang on a drum. You don't have to be good at it. You don't have to worry about what other people think. Just do it for yourself. And if you have the right attitude toward it, it's not only fun and satisfying, and you may or may not end up with something you want to share with any other human beings, let alone frame or put on your wall. But you will be engaging some deep part of yourself and expressing something that is already there. So just do it. I have to do it because it's my profession in many ways. But if it weren't, I often think, what would I do if there was any conception in my life of retiring? And I think, well, I'll probably write a novel. It's one of the things, I've always wanted to write lyrics to music. I haven't done that yet. Maybe I'd do that. But it's a good practice. And it's especially conducive to those, that connection with the divine when you do it in conjunction with your ordinary spiritual practice. If you have a meditation practice, a daily prayer practice, whatever it is, if you're settling into a deep state of quiet, on the heels of that, on that foundation, do something creative, sing a song, paint something, draw something. You'll be surprised, and it's an adjunct. It's bringing the grace of ordinary spiritual practice out into the field of expression. And that's a good habit to get into. And the other aspect of it, of spiritual practice, art as practice, is when we partake of art. And we see paintings and sculptures, when we read great poetry and fiction, when we listen to music, as you will this afternoon, some of the great music of our era. Something happens to us. We've all had that experience of being deeply moved by beauty, by a work of art. It's happened to me in museums, especially if there's no one around taking selfies in front of the paintings. And of course, it happens when you read great poetry or, listen to great music. Music especially. There's something, about about sound and that medium. That, artists have known that, and spiritual teachers have known that. There's something beautiful in beauty. There's something that elevates the soul, something that cracks open the heart, something that opens the mind. We've all had that experience of, it was so beautiful, it took my breath away. What is that moment of no breath? Except it's a yoga. It's a practice. It's something that stirs something holy and sublime within us. It's if you have the right attitude and you go to a concert or an art gallery or a museum of where the quality of the art is high, or you're sitting in solitude reading a poem, it's almost like being in a temple or a church, or it's like in the Hindu tradition. The yogis have a term called darshan. Maybe you've heard it. Darshan is essentially being, it has to do with being in the presence of something holy. Usually it's the darshan of a saint or a guru or a high, spiritual master, but also in the temples, in the gazing at the images of that, how the divine is depicted in many ways. In the Western world, it might be looking at, the stained glass windows or the sculptures in a church. There's something holy. Well, a museum can evoke that. And there's essentially two kinds of art we can partake of in the context of spirituality. And one is art that's intentionally spiritual. It's meant to convey a spiritual message. It's meant to instruct or inspire or to evoke a kind of grace some kind of connection to the divine. Bach, Beethoven, Mozart, they all wrote sacred compositions. I'm not Christian, but every Christmas I listen to the Christmas oratorio. On Easter, I listen to music that was composed to celebrate that element of the tradition. I go to India very often. I go to evening artis, rituals by the Ganges, and there's always chanting, the chanting of sacred mantras. Kirtan, that many of you are familiar with now in the West, the chanting of mantras back and forth. Hymns in a church. Hebrew chanting in synagogues. The music of the Sufis. These are all explicitly spiritual themes. Even pop music. We'll hear today George Harrison especially composing lyrics meant to convey spiritual messages. In the lyrics, and also in how the sounds are arranged. Many other, even ordinary pop artists have created. In fact, I just read a review of it seems that Paul Simon has a new album coming out, and he's 82 and thinking about the end of life. Leonard Cohen did something very similar, and it's called Psalms. And they're all original compositions, but they're not about falling in love, as a teenager anymore. Bob Dylan did something like that, trying to get to heaven before they close the door. There's lyrics and themes that are explicitly spiritual, and even Madonna had, Sanskrit chanting in some of her songs. And in dance, sometimes they use movement to tell spiritual stories from whatever tradition it is. And of course, the museums are filled with medieval era paintings of biblical scenes. These are meant to instruct, not just to move you by their beauty, but the combination of the beauty and the content can do something if it resonates with you. The faces of the saints, Buddhist statue. I mean, everybody has a Buddha on in their lawns now. It evokes something. And I'll tell you, when I was in the very early stages of exploration of things that are spiritual, and especially of the East, I moved to Boston in the 60s, and I met someone who said, you should go to the Museum of Fine Art. They have the room they call the Temple Room. It's all Buddhist statuary and plants. And I went, and I happened to be alone in the room, and it was this mind-boggling experience. I'd never seen anything like that before. And I went, and I looked at the faces of the Buddhas and the Bodhisattvas and the statues, and I said, whatever those guys had, I want it. You could feel it. It evokes something. That was a spiritual practice. I didn't know it was. I thought I was going to a museum to see paintings. But in the same museum, subsequently, they have a lot of Impressionist works and Renoirs. This is just scenes of beautiful women in cafes in Paris and all that sort of stuff. Well, it evokes a similar experience. So it doesn't have to be so-called sacred art. It could just be really beautiful, really something about a composition, something about the way sounds are put together in music, something about a poem. It's not necessarily the content, not necessarily the meaning. It's the sheer beauty of it and the sheer structure of it, that it could be something profane, in terms of, it could be just an ordinary love song. It could be You know, in the yearning you hear in love songs, oh, I miss this person and oh, I want love and all that. Well, if you forget about romantic love for a minute and you think of just wanting to love and divine love, there's not much difference. And that's why love songs can move us so much. When I listen to Billie Holiday or, you know, any great singer singing a song of heartbreak, you know, it may just as well have been a biblical prophet singing about the longing for God. It could be Rumi's poetry with the longing for the divine. In fact, you read the Song of Solomon, scholars, they're always arguing over whether he's talking about a profane love for a woman or the love of God. Either way, it moves us in a similar way. It opens something up. You know, Keats said that truth is beauty and beauty is truth. And you think, oh, you know, that's a poem I learned in school. But think about it. There's something really profound about that. Truth is beauty and beauty is truth. And if you think about truth in the highest sense, the most beautiful things are the most holy things. And there's something about when you walk in the woods and you're in nature and you're moved by the beauty of it all and the wonder of it all. One of the reasons that can be a spiritual experience is you feel this deep sense of appreciation. And it's only natural to then say, well, to whom do I express this appreciation, this gratitude for this beauty? It's an act of creation, so credit goes to the Creator. And that's what happens. Well, it's a similar thing if you listen to great music or look at great art or read a great poem. You feel moved and you feel appreciative. And you can thank the artist, but then you can take it a step further and thank the creator of the creation that gave us the creator of the art. And it becomes an act of spiritual gratitude. When I was reading poetry, I remember discovering Gerard Manley Hopkins. Do you know him? A Christian monk who wrote the most sublime poetry, and much of it is about the holiness of nature. I wish I could remember some of the lines. And not long after that, I discovered Dylan Thomas. You don't get more profane than Dylan Thomas. This is a drunk who, you know, used to get drunk in the White Horse Tavern a few blocks from where my brother lives in New York, and there, you know, it's like a shrine to Dylan Thomas. And, you know, he died on the street, a drunk. But read his poetry about, you know, when he's in nature in his native Wales, and it's just as moving as Gerard Manley Hopkins or John Keats or all these people who are explicitly religious and explicitly spiritual. So that's the other message, which is partake of the arts. Partake of it. Go to museums, go to galleries, read poetry, read great stories, go to concerts. But here's the other message. The degree to which taking in art is a spiritual experience depends a great deal on what you bring to it. What attitude, what consciousness, what level of receptivity are you open to the experience? Art can take us by surprise, as we all said, but there's an old I often like to quote this. If those of you who read my last book for the series you did, this will sound familiar. But a Zen master said that enlightenment is an accident and meditation makes you accident prone. Shakespeare in Hamlet says the readiness is all. So if you're ready, if you're prepared, grace just happens. But it's like the wind just happens. But if you're in a boat, you want to set the sails the right way. So if you enter the experience of participating in art, witnessing art, hearing it, seeing it, and so forth, with the right attitude and the right frame of mind, you're more receptive to what it can bring to you. Same with walking in the woods or anything else. I've often said, if I walk in the woods, it could be a sublime experience, or I might as well be on a treadmill in a gym, depending on what I bring to it. So appreciation and receptivity to the beauty and the content of art, we have responsibility for ourselves to get the most out of it. If you bring to art the same reverence that you would bring to seeing a cathedral or going to a temple or going to a national park or whatever it is, you'll get more out of it, and you'll be able to absorb it as a spiritually uplifting practice. Very similar to your meditation practice, your prayer practice. If you come to it with an open heart and an open mind, and you don't analyze unless you're reading a good murder mystery, then it's okay to analyze. And you don't evaluate and you don't judge it, you just take it in with appreciation and gratitude. It's a spiritual experience. So I will leave you with that and invite you to come this afternoon. Don't analyze it. Don't judge me or the musicians. Just take it in, enjoy it, and we're going to have fun. We're going to have a lot of fun this afternoon. I hope you all come and feel free to sing along and dance and relive your youth. Thank you for you.